We've all heard this story, right? Humanity discovers farming, builds civilization, and lives happily ever after. It's the ultimate story of progress. But what if that story's totally wrong? What if one of our greatest achievements was also our biggest mistake? To figure that out, we've got to go way back. To really wrap your head around this, you have to understand the sheer scale of time we're talking about. For 95% of our time on this planet, we were foragers. We lived in small, nomadic groups, gathering and hunting for our food, not producing it. That whole gigantic stretch of time, the Old Stone Age, just dwarfs the tiny sliver of history where we've been farmers. So what happened? What flipped the switch? You know, the simple story is that we just got smarter, we figured out how to plant seeds, and we settled down. But, well, the real story, the one the evidence tells us, is so much more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting than that. Before we even get into why things changed, we've got to talk about what life was actually like before farming. And you might be surprised to hear that a lot of the innovations we credit to farming, well, they actually started long before the first plow ever touched the soil. Get this one totally flips the script. We usually think of animal domestication starting with farmers needing livestock. But nope, it actually started with hunter-gatherers. Some studies even suggest our relationship with wolves, which eventually led to dogs, could have started over 25,000 years ago. This wasn't about food, it was about partnership. All right, here's another big one to bust. The idea that we were all just wandering around until we invented farming, it's just not true. In places that were rich with resources, hunter-gatherer groups started to settle down thousands of years before they ever planted a single crop. They were building permanent homes and living in villages. And if you want some stone-cold proof, just look at Göbekli Tepe in what's now Turkey. This place is unbelievable. It's a massive complex of huge, carved stone pillars, all arranged in perfect circles, and it was built by hunter-gatherers. This was a massive, organized project. And here's the kicker. Complex society came first. Agriculture came after. Okay, so if it wasn't some big eureka moment, what was it? What actually pushed humanity towards farming? Well, it wasn't one simple invention. A better way to think about it is like a global pressure cooker, a whole bunch of conditions that started building up all around the world at about the same time. I mean, just look at the timeline here. This thing didn't happen overnight. We call it a revolution, but it was this incredibly slow burn that took thousands and thousands of years. It really kicks off as the last ice age ends, in a period we call the Neolithic or the New Stone Age. So, what exactly was in this pressure cooker? What were the ingredients? First up, the climate went through a massive shift. The planet warmed up, ecosystems changed, and wild plants started to thrive. Second, our populations were growing, which put more pressure on the local food supply. And third, and this is key, these people weren't clueless. They had an incredibly deep knowledge of their environment. They already knew how to manage plants and animals. Farming wasn't a sudden discovery. It was just turning up the dial on things they were already doing because they needed more control. You know, that word revolution makes you think of something fast, dramatic, right? But the spread of farming was literally the opposite. It was this slow, creeping wave that took thousands of years to wash over the planet. To really get a feel for this, let's zoom in. Let's look at one specific group of people who were right there on the edge of this massive change, the Natufians, from the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, these guys were fascinating. Seriously, as you can see from the animal bones found at their sites, they were amazing hunters. Gazelle was a huge part of their diet. But that's not the whole story. They were living in settled villages and using tools like sickles to harvest wild grains. They were right there, living on that razor's edge between foraging and full-on farming. And from people like the Natufians, this whole new way of life starts to spread out. This map just shows it perfectly. See the yellow and red dots? Those are the oldest farming sites in the Near East. And as you move across Europe, the colors change, getting younger and younger. It's like watching a wave move in super slow motion. So how slow is slow motion? Try 1 kilometer a year. That's it, 1 kilometer a year. It's almost unbelievably slow. This wasn't some kind of invading army. It was just generations of people, slowly moving, slowly changing the world over 4,000 years. Now, there's no doubt that agriculture completely transformed human society. It let our population just explode. But all that progress, it came with a price. a really, really steep price. Just look at these numbers. It's staggering. Around 10,000 BCE, the entire planet had maybe 6 million people. Flash forward to the year 1, and suddenly there are around 250 million of us. I mean, wow. Farming allowed us to get way more food out of the same patch of land, and that meant more people, a lot more people.
But here's the thing, more people didn't necessarily mean better lives. For the average person, life probably got a lot worse. I'm serious. Early farmers worked way harder than foragers. Their health got worse. Living crammed together with their animals, that brought a whole host of new diseases, the first ever epidemics. And by relying on just a few crops, they were totally at the mercy of famines. But maybe the biggest change of all was the rise of social inequality.
So, where did that come from? How did we go from these small, fairly equal groups to societies with kings and peasants? Well, one really compelling theory says it wasn't about how much food you could grow, but about how well you could store it. Okay, think about it like this. Compare something like wheat with something like yams. Grains, you harvest them all at once, you can see the big pile, and you can store it for a long, long time. That makes it super easy to control, to tax. A surplus of grain is something a powerful leader can literally take. But roots and tubers, they stay in the ground until you eat them, and they go bad pretty quickly. It's way harder for a king to come and take your yams, right? That storable grain, that's what created the foundation for states, taxes, and elites. So, we're back where we started. The shift to agriculture set us on the path that led right here, to today. It gave us cities, writing, and the modern world. It let our population grow beyond anything imaginable. But it also brought disease, inequality, and famine into our story. It's a legacy of trade-offs that we are absolutely still living with. So what do you think? Was it worth the price?